Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have you join us today. We're just waiting for some of our participants to join us, but we will turn it over shortly to our founder.
Are we ready? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Esta Solar, the president and founder of Futures Without Violence. And I'm so pleased to welcome all of you today to our discussion on women, AI, and the workplace. We have almost 1,200 people registered for today's event from every sector of work across the US and globally. We are so glad you have joined us today, and we look forward to your comments and to your questions. So why are we here? Futures has long cared about healthy workplaces where everyone can be supported and thrive, and especially about women's ability to achieve economic security for themselves and for their families. And now the AI revolution is here. The story of how it will benefit or negatively impact women, including survivors of violence, is yet to be determined. AI will change how we work, communicate, make decisions, and lead. And we want women to be ready. This conversation today isn't about fear or about hype. It's about how all of us, women from every industry and walk of life, can show up with confidence to pursue opportunity, advancement, and economic power. And now I am excited to turn this conversation over to my esteemed colleague, Ana Lopez Van Bellen, our Vice President of Economic Security and Economic Opportunity. But before we hear from you, Ana, let's take a look at a quick video on how AI is currently being portrayed in the media. Thank you for joining us today.
What's happening is that we are seeing that emerging technologies, and AI in particular, are re-embedding existing problems, particularly structural inequalities like sexism and racism, into the foundations of that new world that we will all be living in. For example, we know that women are 17 times more likely to experience online abuse than men are. We know that 96% of all deepfakes created are non-consensual pornography, and we know that 99% of those are of women. In fact, most of these tools don't even work if you put in a picture of a man's body. We know that this is a very old problem. Misogyny and violence against women and girls is so widespread. This is a new iteration of it. These videos are highly realistic. It is somebody who has taken your likeness, your face exactly as it is, and a video that looks seamlessly as if it is your body, and then chosen to create hugely abusive, pornographic material.
AI is just going to replace everybody. The whole idea of superintelligence is nothing remains. These things will get to be better than us at everything.
It's crazy what this technology is. It is not a tool. It's more like an intelligent species that we are birthing that has more capability than us.
Incomprehensible machine gods, which tower above us the way we tower above ants, seemingly able to reshape the world however they want, with or without our involvement or permission.
The most nightmare scenario I can imagine with AI and robotics is a world where robots have become so powerful that they are able to control or manipulate humans without their knowledge.
Unfortunately, while we know how to make those systems much more capable, we don't know how to make them safe.
The internet is awash with millions of disturbing computer-generated pornographic images of real people.
Right now, many AI companies train on creative work they haven't paid for or even asked permission to use.
we as professionals and doctors may start having to ask people when we see them in clinic how much AI they're using, how it's affecting their lives, just like we would for smoking, alcohol, you know?
Earlier this year, Bill Gates predicted that humans, quote, won't be needed for most things, end quote.
I was convinced we can make safe AI, but the more I looked at it, the more I realized it's not something we can actually do. In 2 years, the capability to replace most humans in most occupations will come very quickly. I mean, in 5 years, we're looking at a world where we have levels of unemployment we've never seen before. I'm not talking about 10%, but 99%. And that's without superintelligence, a system smarter than all humans in all domains. So it would be better than us at making new AI. But it's worse than that. We don't know how to make them safe.
The possibility for transformation across fields that mean that science and humanities come closer together because we realize the subjectivity of everything and it's just a spectrum is incredibly exciting.
AI systems can ingest vast amounts of historical data and help us predict future events.
To assist farmers in developing countries and locate areas impacted by conflict and natural disasters.
Tools are empowering. Every time we had major technological advances in human history, we've seen better quality of life for many. And that's what AI, I believe, can do also.
AI use has more than doubled in the past 2 years, enhancing efficiency, employee engagement, customer service, and generating better business outcomes like increased revenue across different industries. There's a lot to consider when introducing any technology to employees. However, AI is evolving so quickly that many companies have to create new policies and frameworks, carefully vet AI tools to minimize security and privacy risks, and develop training and resources for employees, all while trying to stay abreast of the latest innovations and capabilities.
There are wonderful things happening in biomedics, the biomedical science that would not have been possible, without AI's intervention.
Machine learning algorithms allow robotic limbs to sense intended motion through neuromuscular signals, enabling more seamless control of prosthetic hands and motorized lower limbs.
We support innovative AI projects led by individuals or teams rooted in the disability communities that they serve. We believe students and educators with disabilities are best able to imagine, design, and deploy solutions that amplify their strengths.
Where AI can make a big difference is in medicine, in healthcare, in radiology. There's been great work, using AI in radiology for years.
The hope that this kind of AI could reach every woman, especially those who never imagined they were at risk.
Being able to identify those 85% of women being diagnosed with breast cancer that had no idea that was coming, to identify them in advance, we're really going to change the face of breast cancer.
For me, long-form writing feels arduous, and I use Copilot to generate first drafts of everything from emails to project plans and even blog posts. I'm never starting from a piece of blank page ever again.
On Granola, you can combine your own manual notes with AI notes, see a real-time transcript, and even get suggestions for questions to ask as a meeting is happening.
I like to take pictures of the slides and ask ChatGPT to compile them together and summarize. And if you actually record a presentation in video form, you can upload that video into Google AI Studio where it's able to process it and generate transcripts and do anything you want with it too.
The platforms learn what each student excels in and what they need more help with, and then it adapts their lessons for the term. Strong topics are moved to the end of term so they can be revised, while weak topics will be tackled more immediately. And each student's lesson plan is bespoke to them.
They'll help you work faster, earn more, and maybe even build the next billion-dollar company. If you know how to work with APIs, you can link dozens of AI tools, build custom solutions, and automate things that no one else can. We live in a world where everyone has access to data, but only those who act on data win. We try to quantify every process in our company. And there are AI tools that allow you to go beyond just reading tables. They help you identify patterns, extract insights, visualize, and even forecast outcomes faster and deeper than manual analysis.
Can we harness AI for good?
Absolutely. AI can be a powerful force for good if we use it thoughtfully. It can help tackle big challenges like climate change, improve healthcare through better diagnostics, and boost education by personalizing learning. The key is making sure it's developed and applied ethically and responsibly.
You've now seen a positive side of AI and potentially a more negative side. And so I would love to turn to the chat and ask you, what are your thoughts related to AI? And maybe something that either hopeful that you are anticipating AI can assist you with, or maybe it's something that you're worried about. And so while we do that, if you can just put your thoughts in the chat, we will try to uplift some of them, and both from Zoom and from our audience on LinkedIn. And while we do that, let me just quickly talk through a couple of things that we want to make sure that we can center our conversation around today. We know that artificial intelligence, or AI, can be viewed as a barrier or an opportunity, depending on who you talk to. We know it's reshaping how we communicate, make decisions, and work. So we have to have this conversation. Today is meant to be an opportunity to consider how to acknowledge the harms and work past how we might be overwhelmed, hesitant, or risk-averse toward AI. We hope we can provide you with a chance to think and reflect on what is possible with AI. But for women, this conversation could not be more pressing. As research shows, women are using AI tools at much lower rates than men, particularly in the workplace. And this gap could have real implications not only for how AI continues to evolve and learn, but more importantly, it can have negative consequences for women's advancement and economic mobility. So, as we start this conversation, my hope is that we can approach it from a different place of curiosity, reflection, and grounded possibility. And so I see some of these chats, your thoughts coming in. And so I hear people talking about the loss of creative thinking. And so certainly that's been something that's been uplifted by the media. That AI, concerned about the privacy laws that do not seem to be keeping up with AI, which is also concerning. Someone said they want AI and robots to do the grunt work like laundry, yard, cleaning. So you can create art and really focus on human contact. I would love that as well. And I look forward to that day. I also see people talking about the community health space. They're seeing a recognized increase in access to care around billing, coding, patient access to appointments, and quality assurance and charting. But then we also, I see people talking about how it's replicating and expanding our existing biases and prejudices. But I will end with this one on a more positive note, that it can help us and others do things more quickly, more productive. And what does this mean for our kids 20 and 14 years into the future? So yes, there's a lot that we can talk about both on the negative and positive side, but we're here today to talk about the possibilities and to acknowledge the harms that we need to be careful of. And so with that, let me go ahead and we're going to ask our experts to join us in this conversation, and we're going to put their bios in the chat so you can follow their work. So please, help me to welcome Professor of Practice Renée Cummings from the University of Virginia School of Data Science, who is a trailblazing AI innovator and global strategist, renowned for her leadership in AI competitiveness, governance, and geopolitics. At UVA and as a non-resident senior fellow at Brookings, she specializes in competitive AI vigilance, AI for national economic development, and the architecture of AI policy and diplomacy. Next, I want to invite Shubhi Rao, founder of Uplevyl, the first technology platform intentionally designed through a female-forward lens to serve the women's ecosystem. A visionary entrepreneur and thought leader, Shubhi is reimagining how women access knowledge, networks, and economic opportunity by combining AI, data, and community into a unified, intelligent platform. She's a former executive at Alphabet, Google, Tesco, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Tyco, and Ford. Lastly, I want to invite Konstanze Frischen, the managing director and co-lead from Aspen Digital, who brings over 2 decades of leadership experience across the globe at places like Ashoka, where she led their global tech and humanity portfolio, and at Globalizer, an accelerator for social entrepreneurs, which she founded. Welcome to our speakers. I'm so thrilled to have you here to have this conversation, and we do want this to be a conversation today. I want to just open us up first to have a conversation about what was your initial reaction to AI when it came out, and how has it evolved today? So maybe Shubhi, we'll start with you.
All right. Well, first and foremost, thank you, Anna and Esta, for inviting me and having me here. I'm very excited. And I'm so honored at the same time to be a panelist with 2 esteemed colleagues, Renée and Konstanze. And thank you to all of you who have joined us for this really critical and important conversation. So to answer your question, Anna, when I first started thinking about AI, and I'm somebody, by the way, who studied it, went to school for it, but let's fast forward and look at the 15, 16 time period of my life. I knew that AI was going to be transformative because I was at Google and I had an early window into how much capital and engineering talent was shifting towards AI. And it was quite obvious that this wasn't going to be another tech cycle. But what I didn't anticipate was the sheer velocity of it. The acceleration that we're seeing today is unlike anything I have seen in my life. And that velocity is exactly why I feel such an urgency. And that also drove me to start, explore this chapter of my life, which is to go away and build Uplevyl. But going back to speed, right? If we just continue at this speed and there is no intention in how we're building this technology, this platform, it's going to create gaps. And we already know that there are significant gender data gaps, which, by the way, is the biggest impetus behind building Uplevyl. And why is that? Because so much of technology is not built by women. I think there's about 13,500 AI practitioners in this country, which is a very, very small percent. I mean, there's only 25% in STEM. But when you really look at women AI practitioners like myself, that's a very small number. And why is that important? Because in the majority, if it's not the women, then we have to ask ourselves the question, are the builders who are building a lot of this technology asking these questions? How will this tech serve women? How will it, for example, support survivors? How will this reduce harm in the workplace? Those systems themselves are not going to reflect those needs unless we proactively think about it and build it. Let's use futures as an example. If we really want to create safer, more supportive workplaces, then AI has to be designed with trauma-informed principles. It needs trusted knowledge sources. It needs real accountability. You can't just scrape the internet and hope that it's going to guide someone navigating domestic violence or harassment or safety risks at work. What you really need is authoritative, expert-driven knowledge, the kind of expertise that Futures, for example, brings, but you need to figure out how to smartly digitize that, work with platforms that are engineered to carry that knowledge responsibility. And that is where I believe that the future is going to lie. And that is about shaping the arc of technology as we move forward. Because all of us today that are on the call, we need to look back. When we look back at history, at least for me, I want to be one of those women who insisted that AI evolve in a direction that actually serves women in the workforce, women at home, women in combat, but really supports organizations fighting for their safety and advancement. And we have a narrow window to do that. And it's going to take all of us. And let me just sort of say that in the end, dollars and cents really matter, as they always do. And so as we think about workplace, we think about technology, we got to figure out how we can also support our nonprofits to be future forward in achieving the impact to drive the solutions that we need in the workplace. So it's what I'm saying is that what through AI, I have realized that it's going to take an ecosystem, and that ecosystem has to come together, and technology can really be that catalyst.
Thank you, Shubhi. Renée, what about you?
Thank you very much for the question. And let me say it's an absolute honor to be a part of this conversation. So, by training, I'm a criminologist and criminal psychologist and terrorism expert. So, I got introduced to AI long before it was called AI. Then we were just calling it data. There is no AI without data. And in the mid to late 1990s, the US criminal justice system decided to expand its database. At that time, database was not a progressive, fun tech word. Database was a very scary word because if you found yourself in a database in the 1990s, it was about drugs, it was about gangs, it was about criminal activity. And that's when the US criminal justice system actually sort of criminalized the concept of data and databases. So, working in that system, using these risk assessment tools, working with juveniles, working in the addiction space, and just realizing that we were using algorithms. And that's the first time that I heard the word algorithm in the late 1990s. It was an actuarial term, looking at risk assessment tools, looking at data-driven tools, looking at the ways in which we needed to make better decisions about parole, about probation, about risk to public safety, about sentencing. So the US criminal justice system has been using algorithms for over 30 years. And it is that work that I was doing in criminal justice that brought me into AI governance and questions around bias and discrimination and the ways in which we need to reimagine data. So for me, it's how do we really reimagine the data that we're using? How do we stretch the imagination of machine learning and deep learning and unsupervised learning, the techniques that are now being used, the techniques that turn data into algorithms and algorithms into AI. So that is the work that brought me there, justice. And so much of my work is centered around due process and bringing the requisite level of due diligence and a requisite level of sophistication when it comes to questions around duty of care, duty to warn, duty to protect. These are very, very critical questions about AI safety, about AI security, about AI governance, about how do we build this technology, who do we invite to the table. It was wonderful hearing Shubhi speak about trauma-informed AI because when I started to speak about that about 10 years ago, no one was speaking about trauma-informed AI or data trauma. So it's funny, it is that work that made me invite myself to the AI party. And once I got involved, I really started to think about AI more critically, how we could use it more efficiently, how do we optimize? And one of the things that I focus on is how do we take the skills that women have when we think about AI and make them transferable skills and translate them into what is happening now in the workplace. I know people always talk about how women are using AI. I always say over 70% of influencers on social media, TikTok and Instagram are women. Women are using AI, and we're going to get into that conversation. So it's my work as a criminologist that brought me to the AI space.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Renée. Konstanze.
Thank you so much, Anna, and really echoing what my co-panelists said here in terms of, being grateful for being here. On the question how I got into AI, my background is as a social anthropologist. And so I've always been interested in the relationship between humans and the artifacts humans build. And with, technology, especially digital technology and AI, it's really interesting to me. It's always been interesting that, humans think, machines, computers, etc., all of that is more objective than humans are. Whereas, it is humans that built them. I think we'll get into that later. So there is a tension here. And then at the same time, we tend to ascribe to machines, human-like characteristics. AI does, AI things, AI has decided, which is not actually what is, when you peel back the layers, it is a very complex thing, and we should be using much more precise language that really refers to the AI executing a program that it has been trained on. So that is very interesting. The second thing I want to say, I worked a lot with social entrepreneurs across the world, including in the globalized South, in terms of, using technology for advancing social causes. And I've seen so often, that people from the US, from Europe with money tend to believe, oh, we have the solution. We're just going to design it for you and going to impose it on you. But there are questions that need to be asked that Renée was touching on. Who owns the data? Who knows the customer base? Who can give feedback? Who understands the outputs and can correct? And who can monetize the data? And all these are questions that I think are not automatically integrated into the dialogue that we read on the newspapers and the media about AI, but that are critical. And that has been really what has driven me into the field.
Thank you. And so hopefully our audience can see we have three very unique perspectives that are informing this conversation. And so let's jump to the next question, and which is really about how women are using AI. And some research has come out saying that women are using it less than men, up to 22% less. Now, that number, I'm sure, is shifting. And in fact, just today, Harvard put out a new AI adoption tracker. Now, it is not breaking the data down by gender, which is always my challenge, but it is saying that it continues to go up. That said, what are the considerations in thinking about encouraging more use amongst women, particularly in the workplace? And maybe, Konstanze, we can start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. This is a really good question. And so, as you said, there's research, Harvard and others, that shows that women are adopting AI tools at a significantly lower rate than men. And this obviously, reads concerning, because if we assume that mastering AI is critical in today's world, when women do that less, then they could fall behind further. This could negatively impact their career, their advancement opportunities. The wage gap could grow further. So obviously that this is a point where we need to intervene. And, we will hear more about specific AI training. I also want to say better clarity in companies is really needed on what authorized AI usage policies are. Because, and this is really interesting, when you go into why are women using AI less often than men, it gets really nuanced. They seem to be, research suggests they seem to be more thoughtful, perhaps, than men. They're more concerned about being judged harshly in the workplace for relying on them, which is why I mentioned the AI usage policies. But also, they are more concerned about the ethics of using AI tools. And that is a really valid point, and actually leads me to a point that has me, at least equally concerned as AI usage by women. And this is, how many women build AI. And Renée was alluding to this earlier. We need more women to get involved with training AIs, with building assumptions, models, benchmarks, etc., and collecting data. All women, women of color, women from all walks of life, because the models currently pull from deep sets of historic data that reflects the world as it is. And we know the world is, has inequities, and there are power relations there that get reflected. I don't know whether you saw or read this article that was recently in the news, just like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think it was the CEO of Chanel, Lena Nair. She's a woman. She was at Microsoft headquarters, and she asked ChatGPT to create a picture of Chanel's senior leadership team. And the image the bot created was 100% men in suits, right? Despite herself being the CEO, being a woman, and Chanel's workforce being more than 75% women. So again, why is that? It is because AI gets trained on data that is deeply biased, and without women from a range of backgrounds, building and inputting and correcting that, it does not create the world we want to live in. So that really matters, and it also the question of what are the problems we want AI to solve. should be a question that is not answered, in the majority by man.
I'd just like to add a little something there. As a critical data scientist, one of the things that I do is interrogate data. And I think for too long, we've been looking at data through very stereotypic frames. And one of the things that we need to do when I say we need to reimagine our interpretation of data, think about it. Billions of dollars are being spent to deploy beauty apps. There are more women using beauty apps and online shopping apps and using all different types of AI than ever expected. Coming back to what I said earlier, 70% of the influencers on TikTok, on Instagram, on all social media platforms are women who are also being followed by women. I would say it's not a usage problem, but it's transferable skills problem. Because if you are spending billions of dollars to build beauty apps and you're investing billions of dollars, it means someone's using it, and women are using it. When we think about online shopping, where you have some of the most sophisticated algorithms being used, there are more women using these advanced AI shopping tools than ever. I still cannot figure out virtual try-ons, but there are women who are doing that and uploading their photographs and getting those sunglasses and glasses frames to fit them. When we think about predictive algorithms and predictive healthcare and precision beauty, when we're thinking about the many, many ways that women are using algorithms, the challenge is this. In data science, the things that we are coding and the things that we are focusing on would be the ways men may be using it in the workplace as it pertains to financial services or optimizing or productivity tools. But let's not be fooled and believe that women are not using AI. It's the way that we continue to collect data. As we have historically devalued women's work, there is a pattern in the ways in which we're collecting data that continues to devalue the ways in which women are using. So it's a question for me about confidence because women are using it. It's now how do we transfer those skills from the beauty apps and the filters and the online shopping and the TikToks and the IG experiences? And how do we turn that into confidence in the workplace? Because if you are using any beauty app, you are using advanced algorithms, you are doing behavioral analysis, you are doing predictive modeling, you are doing comparative analysis, and you're dealing with questions around trust and privacy and governance. So again, women are using it. The data is not showing it. The models and the approaches have historically and stereotypically been masculine. Maybe we need to bring more of a feminist framework. And there is an area of AI, feminism, that really intersects with AI that speaks to the ways in which we need to uplift what women are doing in the space. So it's transferable, and it's really about how do we translate it in the workplace.
Thank you. And I couldn't agree more that that these are transferable skills, that maybe what we need is training and we need policies to help model that. But Konstanze, was there something else you were going to add before we
No, I was just, so as Renee was saying, it's always what you look at and what you measure, and garbage in, garbage out, right? If you have a very narrow frame, the research that you quoted initially, women are using it less often, what was the official workplace where that data was drawn from, as opposed to the informal economy, the creator economy, where, women thrive and dominate, but that doesn't get reflected. So it all comes back to this point about, who makes decisions, who measures, what data is being used for what, and how is it being monetized,
Wonderful. So let's move on to the next question. So as we, obviously, we're here also to talk about the workplace and how we can use AI to increase productivity, which some reports are saying up to 40%. What are the places we should be encouraging usage to improve that productivity? And maybe Shubhi, you can start us off. You're muted.
Oh, okay. I'm just going to respond to this question to building off from the previous responses, which is, and I agree with Renee and Konstanze that, what does really even 22% mean? I don't even know how to interpret that data. Because AI actually sits in the broader STEM story where women have been underrepresented for decades. And we're not going to really flip that overnight. And so when they say, well, we're not using AI, what does even AI mean? Is it robotics? Is it deep neural networks? Is it generative AI? Which, by the way, generative AI is only a small subset of the broader AI field. And so, when we think about us as women and as leaders, what should we be doing? And it's more than just learning how to write better prompts. And by the way, there is, of course, usefulness to that by making us much more productive, by taking any repetitive task. I mean, that's just table stakes. And I think that's coming into corporate America, and people are slowly embracing it, and that's going to happen. But I think the bigger opportunity here, as we think specifically about corporate America, and you hear this on every earnings call where every company, it seems like on planet Earth, is AI first now. And why do they say that? Because they're making big investments in re-engineering of processes. So the opportunity for us is not just using the AI, but really shaping how work itself can get redesigned with AI. And that means all of us in our jobs, in our roles, we have processes, we have workflows. So how do we think about, what workflows could exist now that didn't exist before? How can we reduce this low value work and create space for higher judgment, human work? How can AI actually support safety, well-being, equity in our workplaces? And for that, I echo exactly what Renée and Konstanze said, is we got to hammer on the 2 points. And this is how we're going to really improve our productivity, and all those metrics will happen if we fundamentally ask ourselves these 2 questions. On the data side, where is our data coming from? Does it meaningfully represent the constituents? Are we checking for biases? Are we looking at the sample outputs and saying this is harmful or this is erasing lived experiences? And on the training side, who's at the table when these systems are being designed and tuned? Who are the decision makers? What values and guardrails are being built in from the start? Because if we don't ask these questions as leaders in the workplace, as these processes are being developed or being re-engineered, then when you think about productivity in the broadest sense, we're going to go look back in time and we're going to have to rebuild everything, or we're going to create a system that perhaps is not going to be inclusive and may not be what we set out to build, that really drives a positive societal change.
Thank you, Shubhi. I know time is flying, but Renée, any final thoughts on this question before we?
Most definitely. I think it's this. I always say we have got to become very savvy with AI. AI is the language of the now. It's the language that we're using. So it's part of our whole literacy, as well as our sort of linguistic versatility and agility. And it's all part of this broad concept of diverse intelligences, which I'm so committed to. So AI is a critical part of that. But also remember, the research shows that many companies investing in AI, investing in Gen AI, are not seeing the kinds of return on investment when it comes to productivity. There are many organizations that have banned ChatGPT, that have, are not allowing employees to use it. So for me, when it comes to women, I believe that women are already very savvy with this technology. One of the things that we don't do as well as we should do as women is the confidence. And we have got to become more confident in the workplace. We've also got to think about how we're hiring or who we're not hiring when it comes to who we're retaining or who we're not retaining when it comes to the technology. So again, exactly there with Shubhi, because as I said, as a critical data scientist, it's all about the data. And the data could be saying one thing and something completely different is really happening in the space. And sometimes the media and these headlines that we continue to see that women are not using it, a lower percentage, it's the narrative. We've got to flip the script on that narrative and give women the confidence to really stand up in the workplace. Where we definitely want to see more women, for me, would be in the AI governance space, would be in the space that are looking at AI policy in the workplace. Because as the video showed, many of the challenges that we continue to see when it comes to bias, when it comes to discrimination, when it comes to deep fakes, when it comes to who is being monetized and who is the technology being weaponized against, when it comes to questions around privacy, misogynistic technological approaches, or the kinds of biases that we continue to see when you ask an algorithm or you ask a GPT to give you photographs or images of CEOs or of biologists or of whatever it is. And we continue to see those biases. We need to have more women's voices in the conversations, but we need to also move away from that dominant narrative that says that women are using, women are a lower percentage, women are going to lose their jobs, because what we're seeing may not be that, because I think if anything, women have the agility, the flexibility, the creativity, and the adaptability that's required at this moment.
Wonderful. So there's a lot for us to consider in how we are encouraging, promoting, modeling AI usage in the workplace, especially for women. And one of the things that we do here at Futures is we manage a national resource center called Workplaces Respond, where we care a great deal about safe workplaces. And so we've seen some reports out that maybe people need to start thinking about creating strategic plans where they're thinking about how to integrate AI and its usage in the workplace. But Renée, I'm going to ask you to wrap us up here with this question. And before I ask the question, I'm just going to let our audience know that we do want your final thoughts in the chat about maybe some takeaways that you're having from this conversation. But Renée, how should we be thinking about AI's role in addressing gender-based violence in the workplace?
Most definitely. And when we think about AI's role, we've got to also think about the culture of our workplace, because there are many workplace cultures that are very complicit when we think about gender-based violence, when we think about violence in the workplace. I think what we've got to understand is that this technology needs to be governed. It didn't come with a manual. It didn't really come with a playbook. Many of us, and even the people who are building the technology, are learning as we go along. And one of the things we all know about AI is that we don't know about AI. We still don't know where this is going to end. But what we do know is that we have got to be more proactive. We have got to understand the very unique challenges that the technology brings with it. We've got to understand questions around bias and discrimination. And we've got to understand that one of the things that we don't want to see with the technology is harm. So it requires awareness, it requires education, it requires information, and it requires these conversations in the workplace, in the broader society, as it pertains to how this technology could be weaponized, but the dangers of the technology, particularly those dangers that are linked to the bias and the discrimination. And one of the things that we've also got to think about is that much of the violence that we continue to see, let's think of youth violence. Let's think of, make me putting back on my criminology hat here. When we think about how much of the violence begins as social media conversations and then spill out onto the street, or then happens in the workplace, or happens in the parking lots, or happens in our classrooms. So we've got to be very, very critical and circumspect in the ways in which we're thinking about this technology and the kinds of guardrails that are required to ensure that we protect each other. And of course, the technology has limitations. So I always speak about that duty to warn and that duty to protect and that duty of care, because one of the things I am committed to is justice. And we know justice begins with equity, fairness, and of course, due process.
Thank you. Shubhi or Konstanze, anything to add before we turn it over to the audience, which please, if you can add your questions in the chat, we will be uplifting them in a moment.
You want to go ahead, Shubhi, first?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just adding on to what Renée is saying, that, when we talk about AI, just bringing this back home, right? Like, let's just think about futures and workplaces around the country. I also think about it in the context of what could be positive and what could be negative. And just looking at this from a micro perspective, how can AI really help bring the positive side of AI in the context of safety? So imagine today, what do? We Google and we say, hey, what are my rights? And a survivor in her moment of crisis is looking for Google to surface this trauma-informed, jurisdiction-aware guidance. And it's not necessarily grounded in expert content from organizations like Futures. But this is where AI can be a force of good, because we can partner with organizations like Futures to bring forth the clearer information on policies and options and protections in a language that the everyday person can use. It can be part of the workflows. This goes back to me thinking about re-engineering our processes and how can we then use technology for good and provide, again, partnering with organizations like Futures, providing that expertise and bringing it into the hands of every manager, for example, where they are the first line of response. They can get that just-in-time coaching. They can understand exactly how to respond to disclosure, what not to say, how to document, right? So this is a great example of how AI can be used for good. We talked about using data for good. Imagine taking all of this data that we have, whether it's aggregated from exit interviews or surveys or complaints, hotline data, pulling all of that together. Is now you're moving from one-off incidents to a structural change. And then, of course, on the risk side is everything that Renée said, like who's training these algorithms, where's the data coming from, how are we thinking about the safety and the privacy of it, when does a human jump in to say, whoa, this is too sensitive, this must be human-led, right? So when we just even using this one example of workplace and Futures in itself, and that those workflows, we need to go back, reimagine. And this is where I think women can really lead and own the new world that I imagine that can be part of force for good.
Wonderful, Shubhi. Last thoughts, Konstanze.
Yeah, I just want to shamelessly plug an opportunity here based on the fact that, sort of reshaping the narrative, the time is now. And then also based on the fact that solution and innovation often comes from the place where problems are most acutely felt. So my organization, the Aspen Institute, Aspen Digital, we just launched a major grant challenge together with Pivotal, a group of organizations founded by Melinda French Gates. So it's a 60 million nationwide grant competition to discover and scale solutions to drive innovation in the workplace, that innovations that benefit everyone and build a better place for women. So I would encourage the audience to check that out. It is winchallenge.org, and register before December 11, I think is the deadline to register. That then gives you an opportunity to apply. We're looking for solutions around workplaces, culture and practices, and then around narratives, and also very specifically around AI policies, AI tools, AI AI adoption, and really want to see what is happening in the marketplace and what new ideas and innovations are out there.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you to our amazing speakers. We're going to turn it over to some Q&A. And so I am going to lift up just a couple of the questions that have come through our chat. And I'll start with this one. How can we help curate and lift up data that corrects the narrative of AI usage and continues to include women and underrepresented populations' experiences? Do we get one person?
I will just say interrogate the data. Never take data as it is. Drill as deep as you can. Bring a trauma-informed approach to it. Bring a justice-oriented approach to it. And whatever you're doing with data, always ask, what is the data not saying, as opposed to what is the data saying?
Okay. Moving on to another question. What does AI technology that cares about and serves women look and feel like?
You want me to take that?
Sure.
Okay. Well, the first, most importantly, I would say that if you look back at so much of technology that has been built today, data privacy and security have been an afterthought. And most of these large platforms have tried to do the bare minimum because there's a real cost to having to go back and build all of that from scratch. And why is that? Because majority of these models, their monetization is truly based on data extraction and exploitation. When you have a monetization model where you are the product, right, your data is being extracted and then made available to the advertisers around the world for billions of dollars, you are not exactly excited jumping up and down to think about privacy and data security. And this is where women, the feminine energy that shows up when we build technology, it is a non-negotiable. And that starts the first line of code. When I wrote my first line of code, started from that place of making sure that everything we did was rooted in data, in privacy and security, and not violating our women. And that, I think, is probably, there are many other factors, but I would say this is fundamentally the biggest differentiator and most important point.
Thank you. I'm going to end, since we're running out of time here, on a very simple but yet most important question. Where do you go to get education on AI? Maybe at the beginner level even. And I saw someone in the chat made a recommendation for your platform, Shubhi, but I would love to hear from others. Where do you go?
I could say go to All Tech is Human. We just released 5 really solid AI and responsible AI courses that will really energize you, beginner level, intermediate level as well. And it also gives you direction to do something more advanced. So you can certainly try All Tech is Human. Of course, if you want a bachelor's, master's, or PhD in data science, you can certainly come to the School of Data Science at the University of Virginia. And I would just love to meet you there as well. So always putting that plug in for UVA.
Thank you. Okay, so with the time that we have left, let's talk a little bit about some of our takeaways. And I think all 3 of you have uplifted some really critical and important points for us to keep thinking about and ruminating as we move forward from our conversation today. And so, Konstanze, you talked about working with social entrepreneurs across the globe and how we need to ask who understands the outputs and can monetize that data. And so it's important to have that conversation and continue to ask others to think about that. And I loved also what you said, Konstanze, about how research tends to indicate that women are more thoughtful in the use of AI and in the ethics of its use. Shubhi, you talked about how you always felt like AI was going to be transformative. And yet, what are some of the critical questions to be asking? Where is the data coming from? Does it represent the constituents accurately? And who are the decision makers who are deciding how AI is used in the workplace? And then Renée, you talked about I loved what you said about getting more women into the governance of AI, and because that's really what's going to be the game changer in how AI is used, what are the guardrails that are set up for it, and that is just so critical for the continued evolution of AI, not just in the workplace but also outside the workplace. And so these are all really important and very critical takeaways. And I know some of our audience members have put their own takeaways that they're taking with them. And so I'm so grateful. Team, I would love if for those who are listening either on LinkedIn or on Zoom, if you can fill out a quick survey about our conversation today. We're going to put it into the chat or put it on screen. So hopefully you could just take that picture. And so I just want to really just go back and say that there's a lot that we are needing to think about. I know everything from how we are engaging with AI. How do we get our workplaces to think about AI? Are there policies that we need to be developing on behalf of our organizations and companies, or to get our leadership to be thinking about so we can promote ethical usage of AI? I hope that all of you are walking away thinking about the possibilities, but also about the harms to be mitigated, and more importantly, and why you need to continue engaging in this conversation. And so I cannot thank you all enough for joining us today. We are so thrilled that you were part of our conversation, and hopefully this is not the end of this, but hopefully the beginning of many more. So thank you to Renee, coming to us from the University of Virginia. Thank you, Shubhi, for your insights from Uplevyl, and Konstanze from Aspen Digital. I cannot thank you enough for kicking off this conversation with Futures.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
You.
It's such a pleasure. And thank you.
Thank you.
The audience that joined us.
Have a great afternoon, everyone.